Hey, I'm Richard, and I play video games a lot. I've racked up about 1,000 hours on Overwatch and multiple hours in other indie and AAA titles. Now, if 1,000 hours doesn't sound like a lot to you, imagine for more than a month, for 24 hours a day, all you're doing is playing video games. I guess I could call myself a video game aficionado. And from my experience, very rarely are there games that provide both an exceptional gaming experience in regards to gameplay, as well as a coherent story that doesn't make you feel like you just wasted the last 3 hours. And, well, that game is Watch Dogs. Okay, well, the game wasn't that great, but I had to say something good about it. Watch Dogs 2, released in 2016 by Ubisoft, was a sequel to the original Watch Dogs, a game that was quite underwhelming and lacking, but was more than made up for by its second iteration. The game provides an open-world environment with a story that follows a young hacker named Marcus, who lives right here in our beautiful Silicon Valley. After being recruited into a hacker group of misfits who operate the way your parents probably think Anonymous works, he devotes his life into taking down the corporation Bloom, analogous to Facebook or Google in the real world. Utilizing a self-developed software and great teamwork, haven't heard that one before, Marcus and his all-inclusive team, consisting of himself, an African-American programmer protagonist, an Indian-American woman who leads the group, and an autistic introvert, expose the corruption of big data by infiltrating tightly guarded fortresses and hacking their way through the multiple layers of secure encryption on a piece of software. In the end, everything turns out their way. They take down Doosan, the main antagonist and the CTO of Bloom, and restore transparency to their tech-driven world. It seems that Watch Dogs 2 pushes the idea that regardless of background, race, or gender, we must collectively unionize to expose the corruption of large capitalist corporations. Wait, that sounds a bit like— Yep, you guessed it, Marxist propaganda! Ain't no video game that can resist adding in some sort of communism in there. And, might I add, this game was developed in France. All memes aside, Watch Dogs 2 was simply a subpar example of a game that intended to bring to light the exploitations of the top 1%. By shaping Watch Dogs 2 the way they did, Ubisoft in fact promoted the exact opposite ideology that they wished to promote. The thing is, the way certain aspects of video games are framed tend to translate into the actions of our daily lives. In his article, Video Games and Machine Dreams of Domination, John Senbonmatsu argues that the portrayal of racial and sexual themes in video games draw the player away from legitimate instances of these problems, thus reinforcing the already existing norms and numbing the player's emotional responses towards them. Senbonmatsu brings up the Grand Theft Auto franchise as an example. One of the main selling points of these games is the freedom to do whatever the player wishes to do. Thus, sexual violence has a large prevalence. In the game, women are portrayed as weak and defenseless characters, often occupying the role of prostitutes or strippers. Videos online show young males displaying a plethora of ways to kill them, highlighting the physics of the bodies as they writhe and fall apart. Senbonmatsu doesn't make the claim that this violence translates to real-life violence, but rather states that games that invite players to participate in such atrocities belittle actual male violence and legitimize and reinforce misogynistic behavior. This brings us to Watch Dogs 2. Although Watch Dogs 2 also includes gameplay that promotes sexual exploitation, a more nuanced message can be found. To make the game enticing and addictive, Watch Dogs 2 provides a gratuitous allocation of power to the player in the form of lethal weapons and the ability to retry missions over and over again. However, in doing so, they take a very serious topic, big corporation corruption, and trivialize it into a point-and-click shooter. Hacking in the game is simply a click of the triangle button or a push of the right bumper. Effectively, this promotes the message that in the real world, such instances of people defending the rest of society against capitalist exploitation through rigorous coding and underground work can be achieved through reckless gunfights and unlimited revives, while in reality, these people are constantly in fear of being identified by the corporations, who, with their power, can haunt their lives or even go as far as to kill them. Watch Dogs 2 is trying so hard to promote a good message and say that we have the power as citizens and people to do something about this huge corruption. But by doing so in a way that fails to address the reality of it, they undermine the public's perception and awareness towards it. On the other hand, a game that does justice to this theme is an indie GitHub game called Untrusted. It follows an old doctor who is held hostage by an exploitative corporation due to his previous work in exposing them. He must find a way out in order to spread the message to the rest of the public. What this game does better than Watch Dogs 2 is that it makes the game difficult. In order to hack his or her way out, the player must code actual JavaScript that then translates into changing the surrounding environment or the actions of the doctor. It keeps relatively the same story, as tried as it is, but actually highlights the difficulties and risks of such a job. No longer is the player cranking out bullets, but rather cranking out lines of code. These two pieces of media show a simple fact. While it may be impossible for games to be truly realistic and cover all real-life implications, it is our duty as gamers to take the message of each game with a grain of salt. Video game messages should stay in the video game world. To be more specific through a Marxist lens, we should draw the conclusion that the way video games portray resistance against big company exploitation is just that, a video game portrayal of the topic. It skims the surface of the idea, but we shouldn't base our beliefs off of it. At the end of the day, I still just play video games for fun. Not every game is going to need to be analyzed this thoroughly or have a message derived from it, and I think that's fine. So long as you don't go into Facebook and start shooting everyone.